Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump with a warning for Minnesota as tensions continue in the state. And the Trump administration taking a lesson from the Minnesota fraud scandal, vows to safeguard a $50 billion investment in rural health care funding. Mariotsu at the White House. The Crown Prince of Iran says he's ready to lead the country through a transition, but is asking Western countries to take action against the regime to complete its collapse. Luis Martinez with the latest. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado gives a speech in Washington praising the freedom Americans enjoy. While President Trump says he's currently working with Venezuela's interim government rather than Machado. Arian Pazdar reports. The latest in President Trump's plan to acquire Greenland. A group of U.S. lawmakers are in Denmark, meeting with officials to discuss the future of the Arctic island. Jack Bradley brings us the key takeaways.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. The Department of Homeland Security says that during the past 5 weeks, 2,500 illegal immigrants have been arrested in Minneapolis. And the Justice Department announces the arrest of a man who allegedly stole a rifle from an FBI vehicle as it was being vandalized and looted. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security Tricia McLaughlin says that in the past 5 weeks, 2,500 illegal immigrants have been arrested in Minneapolis.
An individual from Ecuador who murdered his 3-month-old son. An individual who's perpetuating human slavery and human trafficking, scores and scores of murders, child pedophiles.
Tricia McLaughlin also explains why ICE has such a large physical presence in Minneapolis and other so-called sanctuary cities.
There are over 1,400 criminal illegal aliens sitting in Minneapolis' jail. Those individuals will not be allowed to be turned over to ICE. So that's what we have to do, is have a physical presence on the ground so we can find those individuals when they're released and we can apprehend them.
McLaughlin says that in order to see fewer ICE arrests happen in Minnesota, there's a simple solution.
Tim Walz and Mayor Fry should let us into their jails.
On Thursday night, FBI Director Kash Patel said that his department is investigating every single organization and person responsible for funding or contributing to the organization of these violent protests like the ones in Minneapolis, as well as going after the violent criminal actors themselves. He told Real America's Voice that generally speaking, these protests are not spontaneous.
Most of these individuals aren't even from those respective areas. But more importantly, behind that, someone has to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for the transportation. Somebody has to pay for the signs. It is an organized, in my opinion, effort to criminally disrupt and cause chaos into our communities.
After videos surfaced of federal vehicles being looted and vandalized on Wednesday night in Minneapolis, DHS says it identified and arrested a suspect. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Raul Gutierrez was federally booked for allegedly stealing a rifle from an FBI vehicle. They say that Gutierrez is a gang member with a criminal history. The DHS also said that on Thursday night in Minneapolis, 12, quote, anti-ICE agitators were arrested for assaulting law enforcement. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump warning of consequences for what he calls agitators and insurrectionists in Minnesota. This comes as his administration lays out steps to safeguard billions in funding for rural health care. NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotsu brings us more from the White House.
Well, the Insurrection Act, which has been used by 48% of the presidents as of this moment, and I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. It's very powerful.
President Trump renewing his threats against Minnesota as tensions there continue to escalate between law enforcement and anti-ICE protesters. Weighing in on Truth Social, he says that when he's forced to act, the Minnesota situation will be solved quickly and effectively. This comes as there have now been 2 ICE-involved shootings in 1 week in Minnesota, the Department of Homeland Security calling both acts of self-defense.
You look at what's happening in Minnesota, it's so sad. And it's so sad because ICE is taking out murderers, they're taking out drug lords.
Minnesota was also on the president's mind this morning when he announced a $50 billion investment in rural health care funding.
It doesn't always have to be a Minnesota where everything is corrupt, where they have health care centers that nobody shows up and somebody's making millions of dollars, where they have daycare centers where there are no kids. It's a scam. It's a big scam.
A massive fraud scandal in Minnesota involves billions stolen from child nutrition, child care, and welfare programs. The controversy exploded in late 2025 with viral allegations of daycare fraud, leading to federal investigations, frozen funding, and Governor Tim Walz ultimately dropping his re-election bid. The Trump administration vows this $50 billion fund will have safeguards and anti-fraud measures to protect taxpayer dollars.
I was in Minnesota this week, Mr. President. It's worse than we've heard. But Minnesota, pardon the pun, is just the tip of the iceberg. California is the varsity team when it comes to fraud, waste, and abuse. We're not going to let that happen. We want transparency for this $50 billion investment. We owe it to Capitol Hill.
Meanwhile, President Trump saying he convinced himself to hold off on Iran strikes for now, praising Iran for allegedly canceling their scheduled executions.
As you know, Iran canceled the hanging of over 800 people. They were going to hang over 800 people yesterday. And I greatly respect the fact that they canceled them. Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings.
This comes as President Trump has issued strong threats against the Iranian regime over the past few weeks as their bloody crackdown on anti-regime protesters continues. And it comes just one day after the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, said that President Trump and the U.S. stand by the Iranian protesters and that all options are still on the table to stop the slaughter there. Reporting from the White House, Mariotsu, NTD News.
Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, said more than 12,000 protesters have been killed in Iran by the Islamic regime. He's been a prominent figure in the anti-regime protests and advocate for transitioning Iran away from the repressive Islamic Republic. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on Pahlavi's visit to Washington, D.C.
Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince of Iran, told reporters here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. that he is ready to lead his country through a transition to democratic rule.
I am uniquely positioned to ensure a stable transition. That's not my opinion. That's the verdict delivered loudly and clearly by the people in the face of bullets. Large sections of the army and security forces have already refused to participate in the killing of civilians. They have whispered their loyalty to me.
Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah of Iran, believes that the Islamic regime in Iran is not the legitimate government of the country, but an occupying force.
Using foreign terrorists, Hezbollah fighters, Iraqi militias, and other mercenaries to slaughter the Iranian people. This is no longer mere repression. This is foreign occupation wearing clerical robes.
Pahlavi has called on the international community to take decisive action to bring the Islamic regime to an end, and he made it clear that no boots on the ground would be needed.
Protect the Iranian people by degrading the regime's repressive capacity, including targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard leadership and its command and control infrastructure. Deliver and sustain maximum economic pressure on the regime. Block their assets worldwide. Target and dismantle their fleet of ghost tankers.
President Trump has promised the Iranian people that help is on its way. The USS Lincoln, an aircraft carrier, has now been repositioned to the area of operation of Central Command in the Middle East. And also, U.S. personnel has begun evacuation of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the closest U.S. military base to Iran. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The White House is detailing phase 2 of President Trump's Gaza peace plan. This comes after Trump announced the formation of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The White House said Dr. Ali Sha'ath will lead the committee and oversee the restoration day-to-day operations in Gaza. He is a former member of the Palestinian Authority. The White House called him a, quote, widely respected technocratic leader. A separate board of peace will be responsible for fulfilling the 20 points of Trump's peace plan. The president will chair the board, and it will have 7 founding executive members. They include Secretary of State Marco Rubio, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. The board will oversee Gaza's stabilization and long-term success, including regional relations, reconstruction, investment attraction, and large-scale funding. The Trump administration said it is fully committed to supporting this transitional framework. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado praising the freedom Americans enjoy and saying Venezuelans will soon be able to live the same reality. And President Trump explains why he's currently working with the remnants of the Maduro regime instead of Machado. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more.
Finally, we can say that we are, yes, the threshold of freedom.
Venezuelans will soon be free. That's the message of opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, speaking at the Heritage Foundation in D.C. on Friday. Machado says she's grateful to speak in front of an American audience after she had to escape her home country last year and the regime of socialist leader Nicolas Maduro.
It seems like a miracle to be sitting here in a free country in front of people that have also given their lives to fight for freedom and justice and democracy.
She added that the remnants of the Maduro regime will eventually be dismantled in Venezuela and that there will be an orderly transition to free elections. President Trump is also calling for open and transparent elections in Venezuela, but previously said that Machado lacks the popular support needed to lead the country. On Thursday, the White House was asked whether Trump still feels the same way.
I think the president's assessment that you just pointed out was based on realities on the ground. It was a realistic assessment based on what the president was reading and hearing from his advisors and national security team. And at this moment in time, his opinion on that matter has not changed.
On Thursday, Machado met with Trump for the first time, giving him her Nobel Peace Prize medal as a gift. Trump commented on Friday.
She said, you know, you've ended 8 wars, and nobody deserves this prize more than in history than you do. And I thought it was a very nice gesture. And by the way, I think she's a very fine woman, and we'll be talking again.
The Trump administration is currently working with Venezuela's former vice president, who became the interim president after Maduro's fall. Trump was asked whether he changed his stance regarding Machado after their meeting, and why he's working with the remnants of the Maduro regime instead of the opposition leader. The president responded by drawing parallels to Iraq.
Remember a place called Iraq where everybody was fired, every single person, the police, the generals, everybody was fired, and they ended up being ISIS.
It's not yet clear if and when elections will be held in Venezuela, and whether the interim president will remain in power or Machado's party will take over. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Cuba, a major strategic asset for Russia and China, now exposed after the capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. John Suarez, the executive director of Center for a Free Cuba, unpacks what the moment means tonight on One-on-One with Steve Lance. Here's a preview.
The CCP views Cuba as an analog or counter with Taiwan, and having it there next to the United States. They also have 4 bases spying on the U.S., and they have been since at least 1992, as we know by the public record. We have to remember that Cuba had successfully penetrated over the years USAID, the State Department, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Pentagon, the National Security Council.
Tune in for the full conversation tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, the president has unveiled his long-awaited plan to lower health care costs. A key senator says he'll take quick action to push the plan forward. Melina Weiskup has the details. 3 major regions in California are receiving significant funding to address the issue of homelessness and addiction. The San Francisco mayor says efforts to improve the situation are already making progress. David Lamb with the update. And the defense for the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk asked a judge in court filings to disqualify the prosecution team. But at a hearing today, the defense objected to prosecutors representing themselves. Stay tuned for more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The president has unveiled his long-awaited plan to lower health care costs. Republicans are planning to take quick action to move the ball forward after enhanced Obamacare subsidies expired earlier this month. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the details.
President Trump is urging Congress to take swift action to codify his so-called Great Health Care Plan.
The lowest price in the world is what you're going to pay. Before, you were paying the highest price in the world by far, and the politicians did nothing about it. So I'm asking Congress to complete the work that we've started.
His newly released plan to lower healthcare costs builds on actions his administration has already taken, like negotiations with 15 pharmaceutical manufacturers to reduce drug prices for Medicaid patients. To address Obamacare costs, the administration wants to send the money currently spent on subsidies directly to Americans instead of insurance companies.
I call it the Unaffordable Care Act, with billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies that help their stock prices skyrocket over 1,700%. I want to end this flagrant scam and put extra money straight into the healthcare savings account in your name, and you go out and buy your own healthcare. And you'll make it.
Lawmakers have been working on a deal to temporarily extend Obamacare subsidies while addressing waste. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who's recently been at odds with Trump, said she will not give up the effort to extend the enhanced subsidies, telling reporters, "I think we have to respond to the immediacy of the situation that we have now." Another key Republican involved in the negotiations was quick to support Trump's plan. Chairman of the Senate committee dealing with health care, Senator Bill Cassidy, said he agrees with the president and vows to take action on the president's affordability agenda.
And they will impact everyone, not just a small fraction of those who are within the healthcare marketplace, but every single American will continue to see their costs go down.
To allow for more transparency, the plan will require insurers to post details of claims and require doctors who accept Medicare and Medicaid to post pricing and fees in their offices. Trump's new plan comes as lawmakers are gearing up for a second party line big bill to pass without any Democrat votes. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And what do Americans think of President Trump's plans for health care? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the streets of D.C. to hear from the people.
President Trump right now, he's negotiating with pharmaceutical companies, making sure that the prices we pay here are in line with what people are paying in other countries. What do you make of that plan?
I think it's an excellent plan, but how's he going to do that? Through negotiation and make more pharmaceuticals here.
Yeah, if we can align with other countries, I think then that seems fair.
I watched some documentary about how much pharmaceutical companies can charge and in the U.S., and it just seemed really high. It would make sense if it's kind of out of control that the government steps in.
I would say that, that sounds like a good initiative in general if you're lowering drug prices for Americans.
I think it'll be effective in the short term. The issue is what's its durability, and for the industry, pharmaceuticals, where do they make up their lost revenue if they perceive lost revenue? If that means price increases, they'll do it somewhere else.
No, I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's been far too long for us paying the prices we've been paying while seeing other countries getting, I think, what they call favored nations pricing. So for sure, I want to see us be more in line with that.
When it comes to healthcare, President Trump is talking about, instead of sending money to the insurance company, he's going to send money directly to the people so that people can make their own choice. What do you make of that?
I mean, I'd be interested to hear how that would be done. I mean, anything that I think can be done at the people's choice is a good thing.
I don't see that as being successful in the long run. And if you put the money in my pocket as a consumer, I might simply decide the cheapest drug is the best drug, and that's not always true.
I think if we can educate people on where to put that money, then that feels like the good idea.
To say like, oh, do you want a fair market and prices to be reasonable? That seems reasonable. I don't hate the administration. I don't love the administration. It's just like, it's the government doing their thing. And if it brings good to the people, great.
I mean, I think a better solution would probably be just to have universal health care so that people can, not really have to jump through hoops. And then if they are able to afford a private health care, company, then that's their prerogative.
Well, pharmaceuticals, look at the stock and how much they pay their CEOs, something like $27 million a year. For what? We need to be paying our own people and then allowing us to do what we want with our own money.
3 regions in California are awarded millions to address homelessness and addiction. The San Francisco mayor says his city is using the funds to fix a broken system. NTD's David Lamb reports.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, alongside state and local leaders, announced the next steps and strategies to address homelessness and mental health challenges in the state. Newsom said there was a 9% drop in unsheltered homelessness in California last year. On Friday, he announced $419 million in new funding for the San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego areas as part of the state's Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program.
So we're seeing these investments paying off. It's been a flywheel. I get people's frustration. We all intimately understand that frustration, but we are seeing real progress.
The news conference was held at the Friendship House, a Native American-led treatment space in San Francisco. One of the speakers emphasized the local care regimen he received, which included holistic and cultural remedies.
And utilizing this innovative care system of integrating traditional practicing along with Western medicine is very effective in combating addiction and alcoholism. And I am a prime example of that product.
San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie says the city wants to use funds to continue transforming the approach to care. He highlighted 600 new treatment beds and a record 44% reduction in encampments in December compared to December 2024.
That's what we're doing here in San Francisco, fundamentally changing the system instead of just pouring more money into something that's broken. We have a lot more work to do.
Newsom said the program initially received $500 million when it first began years ago. The state has now invested close to $4.5 billion in total, providing assistance programs and support services to communities throughout the state. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
An evidentiary hearing in the Charlie Kirk murder case took an unexpected turn today when defense attorneys presented a surprise argument. Attorneys for accused killer Tyler Robinson had originally filed papers requesting that the entire prosecution team be disqualified due to a conflict of interest. But before presenting the scheduled witness testimony to support their claim, they objected to the prosecutors representing themselves at the hearing. Prosecutors had already responded on their own behalf in court filings. They called the new request a surprise and said it was a stall tactic. After a 30-minute recess, Judge Tony Graff decided that the hearing should proceed. The next question was whether the hearing should be closed to the public. The prosecution was concerned that certain witnesses' identities should be protected. The judge ultimately denied the request for a closed hearing and ordered that it resume and be heard by the public. This is a developing story. We'll have more on the results of the hearing as we receive more information. Coming up, the latest in President Trump's plan to acquire Greenland. A group of U.S. lawmakers are in Denmark meeting with officials to discuss the future of the Arctic island. Jack Bradley reports. And Canada striking a deal with China. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa will cut its tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, while China lowers its tariff on Canadian canola. What does this mean for Canada and the U.S., and why is it taking place now? Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A group of lawmakers is in Denmark meeting with high-level officials amid Trump's proposal to acquire Greenland. The White House argues the island is critical to U.S. national security. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
A group of U.S. congressional lawmakers is in Denmark meeting with top officials from Denmark and Greenland as President Trump plans to take over the island. The 11-member delegation includes mostly Democrats and 2 moderate Republicans, all siding with Denmark's leaders to oppose the U.S. taking Greenland from the Kingdom of Denmark.
Greenland needs to be viewed as our ally, not as an asset.
And part of the point of this trip is to have a bipartisan group of members of Congress listen respectfully.
But this delegation may not reflect the rest of Congress. Many say that Trump's plan of acquiring the island would fend off threats to adversaries like Russia or the Chinese Communist Party.
Unfortunately, the tiny country of Denmark, a fraction of the size of the landmass of Greenland, cannot protect Greenland from China or Russia. And unfortunately, that's going to fall to the United States of America.
Greenland is very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do.
That's as Greenland sits at the center of U.S. defenses against Russian and Chinese nuclear missile threats.
Which ultimately makes Greenland an ideal location for early warning
in sensor and monitoring that detect and track ballistic missiles.
Denmark's officials say that the threat from China isn't readily apparent.
It is not a true narrative that we have, Chinese warships all around the place.
But many analysts say that even though they're not present, the threat's growing.
If we don't act now, China will become an increasing player in that space. Russia has built up their Arctic fleet well beyond many capabilities.
Several European countries opposing President Trump's proposal have sent a symbolic number of troops to Greenland, only about 30 service members in total. Trump has floated the use of tariffs to push the acquisition forward.
Well, I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security.
But a U.S. takeover of Greenland may not be the ultimate goal here.
But he is forcing NATO to, focus on the strategic importance of Greenland, which will most likely result in a partnership with Denmark and the NATO countries.
As tensions in the Arctic continue to rise, the debate over Greenland's future and its strategic value is far from over. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada will cut its 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. In exchange, Ottawa will get sharply lower Chinese tariffs on Canadian farm exports. China will lower its canola tariff from 84% to about 15%. Carney announced the agreement after meetings in Beijing, where he and Communist leader Xi Jinping pledged to improve relations. Carney's China visit marks a major change in the relationship between Canada and China. In 2018, Canada arrested an executive from Chinese telecom company Huawei at the request of the U.S. And President Trump today said he had no objection to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's preliminary trade deal with China.
How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
And joining us now to discuss is retired U.S. Navy Captain Brent Sadler. He's a senior research fellow for naval warfare and advanced technology at the Heritage Foundation, as well as a former Pentagon official. Brent, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you with us. I want to start, though, with some of what Carney said to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Let's watch that first.
Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
And Brent, your reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that world order is one that it really sees China as all that positive of a player in it. If anything, it's increasingly more dangerous and more fraught. The Germans have gone a similar path with opening up their economy, and the Chinese have largely decimated their auto industry through electric vehicles. And the Canadians are, I think, on the cusp of doing much the same, though at least they're being very judicious, at least in the first year of this deal, on electric vehicles. And Canada is really focusing on the low end of the value chain. You know, they are giving China access to high-end electrical vehicles and other types of commodities, finished products, while China opens the door to agricultural products. Certainly politically significant inside Canada, but not good in the long-term health of the economy. And I think President Trump's got a point. If you can make a deal that's smart and good for your country business-wise, that's, why not? But of course, in the background of this is how does it play out with our U.S., Mexico, Canada trade relations and free trade. So there'll be some other brakes that might be able to pump on some of the worst offenses of this that might impact American economic interest. We can talk more about the security sides, too.
I do want to get to the security sides, but first, some China experts are calling this a bad move on Canada's part, that China is not a reliable trading partner, nor a good faith one at that. And to your point, right, President Trump is saying if Carney can get a deal with China, he should do that. Is there a risk to U.S. interests here with Canada strengthening ties with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, here's where I think President Trump might be, on the surface seeming like not an issue, being pragmatic, understanding very well what the Chinese game plan is in their deals and the dangers that this poses for Canada, but keeping the United States isolated from that when the Canadians find out that they're not getting a good deal, they're going to be coming right back to the United States in a very weak position, much weaker than they already are, and that strengthens the U.S. negotiation point. It's interesting to note that in some of the MOUs and some of the statements, they talk about a first year for milestones and goals to assess this new relationship between Canada and China. So I think the odds are we'll see how things go before really judging, and that's probably what's also a smart and judicious course of action by the White House.
And talk to us about the security concerns that we could be seeing with these deals.
Yeah, the agreement between police and the Canadian mounted police forces is somewhat problematic on its surface, and the details do matter. The focus is on corruption and fentanyl precursors, the same thing the United States and President Trump has been trying to make deals with the Chinese to rein in, and that's not happened yet. Then there's the issue of corruption. What is the definition of this in both capitals? And will it be a easy, ready access point for the Chinese to get information on the Chinese diaspora and perhaps even those who are political opponents of the Chinese Communist Party that live inside Canada? This has also played out not well with the Australians, also in around the 2017 timeframe, with a range of political influence peddling campaigns. And more recently, we've seen even in the United States and Europe, illegal Chinese police stations. If this is allowed, I think this part of the deal would also be very poor for security in Canada. And that one, I think, has a very strong connection to the U.S., given our border that's shared between the two countries and its very openness.
Expanding on that quickly, what would that mean for U.S. national security? Could that be compromised?
Well, let's take immigration, which has been an issue in the past. Canada has some very lax immigration standards, and so getting into Canada and then crossing over the border in the United States is very easy. Most of the attention for the last few years, rightly, has been on the southern border, very dangerous one. But the northern border with Canada has also been a point from which fentanyl and other illegal activities have also occurred, including folks with ties to terrorism. So this is one of the avenues of it. The other part of it is Chinese nationals coming in with ties to the Chinese Communist Party with espionage intent, or perhaps even more nefarious, sabotage type incidents. We've seen several Chinese nationals that have come across the southern border to illegally turn up and be arrested for trying to gain access to U.S. military bases, taking photographs of sensitive military equipment.
And Brent, on the flip side, when it comes to China's interests, what does the regime ultimately want to get out of this relationship with Canada?
Well, I think there's a near, mid, and long term. In the near term, they want to try and show that the United States is not a favored partner and to start to break apart these alliances and partnerships that the United States has, many of them long-standing, like the Canadian one. And most of that is on the surface. There's not much depth to that, and it'll be a challenge. In the midterm, it's, I think, to get some economic benefits and the bartering exchange between, say, canola oil and access for Chinese electric vehicles. But the longer term is to get access into the culture and society, and this is where that security point comes back again. If China's allowed to establish through its United Front work office a much more robust presence, right now there's only a handful, a dozen or so Confucian centers at its universities. If it's able to expand that presence, on perhaps above board, but also potentially illicitly, that gives them a lot more of an ability to influence and control future political leadership inside Canada, something that is becoming a hot button issue now in the United States.
And what are you watching for to see, where this is going and where maybe the defenses should be bolstered?
Well, first on the economic front, and I think that's going to be the canary in this economic deal, so to speak. In March, some of the first kind of test of it will come, and if the Chinese are sincere in making good on these deals, we'll see as early as March to June timeframe whether or not they are going to deliver, and if it actually is in the benefit of the Canadians. The other part of this, of course, is to see how does the U.S. Defense Department of War rather, if it actually has any issues that they start to push to the Canadians in bilateral engagements, to include through NATO.
Well, Brent Sadler, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up in baseball news, both the Dodgers and the Mets make a splash in free agency. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, we've got some football news, but let's start in baseball, actually, as the New York Mets have reportedly agreed to a 3-year deal with free agent infielder Bichette. Where do you see him playing?
That's a good question because, Bichette has been a shortstop his whole career. Now, the Mets already right now have Francisco Lindor, who's an all-star there at shortstop, so I don't see him playing there. Now, I think some teams have also viewed Bichette as a possibility at second base. Of course, the Mets have just acquired Marcus Semien there, another all-star who either plays second base or shortstop. So probably not either of those two positions. Maybe third base, though even there, the Mets have that young star, Brett Beatty, there at third. So I'm not sure if they're thinking him at third base, possibly at first base. The important thing, though, is to get Bichette's bat in the lineup. I mean, he led the American League in hits in both 2021 and 2022. He's got power and average. He's young. He won't turn 28 until March. Now, given he's young, of course, you would think he would get longer than a 3-year contract. This is reported to be. And he's actually able to opt out of this contract after both the first and second seasons and become a free agent again. Now, the total on this deal is reported 3 years, $126 million. That is $42 million per season. So that's pretty good there, too.
And then if he goes back and gets re-signed, go up.
I know, he could be looking at, a $50 million a year deal. We'll have to see. But you know what? The guy who I think we're going to talk about in a second, he did very well, too.
Well, let's do that, because Bichette wasn't the only big signing in baseball recently, as the LA Dodgers reportedly agreed to a deal with free agent outfielder Kyle Tucker. What did you make of this news?
Yeah, the rich get richer for sure. I mean, he was the best free agent available. He's going to the Dodgers, the Dodgers who are the 2-time World Series defending champions. They already have the highest payroll in the game, but between this deal and previously signing free agent closer Edwin Diaz, they've really shored up their two biggest weaknesses in the offseason here. That was the bullpen and the outfield. Tucker here is the big get really in free agency. He's about to turn 29 years old. He's a great hitter, he's a great fielder, he's a great runner. 4-time All-Star, he's a Gold Glove winner in right field there. He's won a pair of Silver Slugger awards. Now, he did not come cheap. Reports have this deal 4 years, $240 million. That's an average of $60 million per season. Only Shohei Ohtani's deal, which the Dodgers signed two years ago at $70 million per year, is more than that. Of course, more than 90% of Ohtani's deal is actually deferred. No word yet on how much of this would be actually deferred, although the Dodgers are very well known for having a lot of deferred amounts in these big contracts. The Dodgers are essentially turning to what the Yankees were under George Steinbrenner, Tiff. Successful and expensive and somewhat disliked for being so good, especially if you're a Royals fan like me and just hoping they can be better, hoping they can sign. We would have taken Bichette or Tucker or Ohtani for sure, but he didn't go to them.
All right, well, big moves in baseball.
Very sad, obviously.
Shifting gears to the NFL, though. Yesterday we discussed the Seattle Seahawks listing quarterback Sam Darnold as questionable to play Saturday with an oblique injury. What's his response been?
Yeah, this was a mystery yesterday when it came out because he had not been listed previously on the injury report either Tuesday or Wednesday. Darnold cleared that up last night, saying he feels like he'll be ready to play Saturday, tomorrow, and he added that there was, quote, close to 0% chance he won't suit up. Now, Darnold made his second straight Pro Bowl appearance at quarterback this season, or I should say was voted in the second time. He finished in the top 10 in a number of passing categories. If he can't go, even though he says it sounds like a very good bet that he will, they do have second-string quarterback Drew Lock. Lock has not gotten much playing time this year, though, because Darnold has been so healthy. They would also possibly be the underdogs if Darnold can go. As it is right now, Seattle 7-point favorites over the San Francisco 49ers on Saturday. It's going to be a big game there, Tiff.
Yeah, would you look at that? But that Seattle versus San Francisco game is one of 4 playoff games this weekend.
Yes, this is the second round of the playoffs, also known as the divisional round. Don't ask me why that is. It's just known as a divisional round, though, folks. Hopefully these games are as exciting as last week's games. Now, last week's game tied an NFL record, 12 lead changes in the fourth quarter among those 6 games. Now, here's the 4 matchups we have this weekend. First, we start off with Buffalo at Denver. That'll be Saturday afternoon at 4:30. And then the aforementioned San Francisco at Seattle. That'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Then on Sunday, the first game, Houston is at New England. That'll be 3 p.m. Eastern. Then at 6:30, the LA Rams are at the Chicago Bears. Now, the weather looks like it definitely could be a factor, too. The Los Angeles Rams are going to fly into Chicago, and it is going to be in the teens. In fact, this game starts at 6:30. The low is for 9 degrees that day. It's going to be very tough for a team from Los Angeles, I would think, to deal with that. We'll have to actually see. Foxborough, Massachusetts is not going to be much better for that New England game. The Houston Texans will come there with it's supposed to be a 60% chance of precipitation. Temperatures will be in the 30s. And of course, Buffalo going to Denver is supposed to be freezing there in Denver again. But of course, Buffalo is from a cold weather area too, so they should kind of be used to it. Really, only this San Francisco versus Seattle is going to have decent weather here, from what I can tell. But I don't know about you, Tiff, but I like watching football games in the snow. It's kind of fun when the elements are kind of part of the game.
When the fans have to dig their way into the stadium.
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Have you ever seen that where they come in, there's snow all?
They get free beers for that.
I bet that helps a lot, right? Maybe it numbs you to how cold you actually are. And then the next day when you wake up and you have frostbite, then maybe that's not so good. But I'm sure it was a fun experience when they do, right?
Some team bonding, but who knew that, covering sports, you also cover the weather.
I know, I feel like a weatherman tonight, I think this could be a second career
We need to put you in front of a green screen for that.
Yeah. Well, that could be a challenge for me, that's for sure. It's hard enough doing it like this.
Well, on that note, I know you have a lot of games to watch this weekend and a lot of updates for us Monday, so Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.